Hello everyone, it's Ren here. Welcome to my room, guys. Hope you're doing great today. Today we're going to talk about this question of being misunderstood that INFJs experience, and I'm particularly interested to explore the further ramifications of this emotion, this concept, this elements of INFJ self-description, and partly in comparison with the way in which this concept, self-description and emotion is present in other types as well. Of course, usually introverted types. The idea that INFJs are misunderstood or feel misunderstood is of course very recurrent, it's very prevalent, but to just take it as a matter of fact, to take it for granted, is always going to bar you from really understanding what's going on. And in this sense, this video is an example of the kind of forensic analysis that I try to conduct in my videos and in my books, trying to look beneath the descriptions and concepts that we read that we think are quite straightforward. And I'm always interested to get to a better understanding, a deeper understanding, but by identifying dynamics and variables that are playing out, in a more subterranean way. As you may notice, my voice is a bit coarse, and I am recording this video from home. So I'm not at work today because I'm sick, but I figured not sick enough to record a video. So there you go. Before we move on quickly, I mentioned my books. You can see here that my new book, The Infinite Soul, is out. You should get it if you want to know how INFJs can live in the modern world, in the contemporary world, in a way that is fulfilling, exhilarating, full of purpose, where they can have a sense of mission and sense of vocation. This is looking at the practical aspects of, this book is looking at the practical aspects of how this can be done. And I just want to mention briefly that this book is a sequel, and that the prequel, as it were, which is a best-selling book on the INFJs, of course, The Infinite Soul. Woohoo! A man and a woman, they look at, one is ecstatic and the other is infinite. It's a pretty good place to be for INFJs. Now, the Ecstatic Soul is a best-selling book, but you haven't got it. It goes very well with the Infinite Soul. One looks like this one, more at the inner workings of INFJ psychology, and this book is more about INFJs in the world today. What can we practically do, practically interpret to lead lives that are more consonant with the way that we are made, so that we experience meaning, purposefulness, and overall rich lives. Now, coming back to this question of being misunderstood, it's very interesting. First of all, you may have noticed that I released a short not very long ago on this very topic. And while I was recording this short, in fact, I realized very quickly that this topic would deserve like a fuller video. I had no doubt that a longer exposition was required for this topic. So I want to start by looking at the phenomenon of being misunderstood or feeling misunderstood when you're an INFJ, the ramifications of it, how there is a complex interweaving of this phenomenon and the self-understanding of INFJs, and compare this to a number of other types. I'm particularly thinking of the INFP, the INTP, the ENFJ, and the INTJ. So I'll have to try to be concise for once, but I think you'll see that comparing the phenomenon of being misunderstood in INFJs, once you get to a sufficiently granular level, it becomes obvious that it's actually distinct from how it manifests in these other types, which as usual can also be a way for you to get a better sense of whether you really are INFJ or if you're one of these other types, or perhaps yet a different one. Okay, so first of all, INFJs being misunderstood. How do we know that this is a common INFJ occurrence? Well, I mean, the most obvious sense in which this is a common INFJ experience and occurrence is that most INFJs, including the vast majority of credible INFJs, people that we have no reason not to consider INFJs, express that. They express that the experience of being misunderstood is very common for them. And I think that if you like, at a more theoretical level, you could perhaps be directed to the writings of, well, in fact, you could be directed to the concept of alienation in the Ecstatic Soul and in the Infinite Soul, which explains how alienation is consubstantial with being misunderstood, because you're removed from the external world. In being removed from the external world, you're inevitably led to speak a language that is somewhat not in sync with the happenings of the external world. You tend to speak more metaphorically, you tend to speak more holistically, you make references people don't understand. A lot of the coloration of, the coloring of your words and statements has a highly subjective, archetypal quality that people often, either they don't understand or they see it as sort of either juvenile or, unfinished thinking that lacks the hard quality of proper scientific or rational reasoning. So all these traits contribute to the INFJ sense of feeling misunderstood. Jung explains that in the description of the introverted intuitive in psychological types, chapter 10. You couldn't refer back to that. Introvert intuition is a highly subjective function that really, for reasons that I've covered many times in this channel before, has a highly idiosyncratic coloring, highly symbolic, highly metaphorical, in some sense very spiritual, which is not going to, if you like, it's not at all squarely united with the ideal of transparent reasoning, which particularly in the West we have, and since the Enlightenment and even more since then, we've come to value above all, as the expression of reason, being able to express yourself articulately and transparently. Okay? So insofar as you're an anti-dominant and you don't do that, or you don't always do that, you're going to experience being misunderstood by other people who are wanting to get a kind of one-to-one transparency that you're not able to provide. That's not how you're made up. Okay. But here is when we get to a territory which you will often not hear covered in other channels, on INFJs or on types in general. What I've said so far, you might well hear it covered, maybe not exactly in these terms, but in similar terms on other channels. But here is where we start digging deeper. Okay? INFJs, if I wanted to put the point provocatively, they like being misunderstood more than they let on. And it's provocative because the idea that they like being misunderstood is obviously not quite accurate. But it's become. I'm not suggesting that this was always part of how INFJs see themselves, view themselves, and what I like to call the self-descriptions and self-understanding of INFJs. You always have a sense of yourself, and a sense of yourself as being of a certain type. And for an INFJ is in the repertory of concepts that constitute and meanings that constitutes being INFJ for them in the world and so on, being misunderstood is in fact a part of it. So I think this is originally, when this developed, when this happened, this might have been done as a coping mechanism, as a way to cope with cognitive dissonance as well. The entire world seems to or a great deal of the world, of people, misunderstand me. Therefore, being misunderstood is really part of my essence. So you, in a sense, in your self-understanding, you move from a trait you have that's a negative trait. People don't understand me because I'm not clear enough, I'm not this, I'm not that, to a trait that's positive, avoids cognitive dissonance. You can't hate yourself. And you can't think of yourself as completely irrational and failing when you make perfect sense to yourself, in yourself. So this sense of being misunderstood is in fact kind of a label or kind of proof that I really am INFJ. I speak a language that makes sense to me, it's idiosyncratic, and when, to the extent that I'm misunderstood, this is only a manifestation of my identity. So being misunderstood is something that INFJs like more than they let on. Because if they were never in any way misunderstood, I think this would seriously cast doubt on their identity as INFJs, on their self-understanding. To the extent they care about that self-understanding, there is a part of them that will care about the experience of being misunderstood, right? That's not to say they love it, but it's still a part of their self-understanding. That's what other channels want to tell you. Now, this is why I said also in a previous video, or rather the short I released on INFJs being misunderstood, that it's much more egregious for INFJs to be misunderstood in the sense of their thought being distorted and simplified by their interlocutors, than being misunderstood in the sense of the interlocutor literally not understanding what they're on about. INFJs can really, really accept the idea of not being comprehensible to others, because it only confirms their self-understanding. Whereas if the other person misunderstands them in the sense of simplifying and distorting their thought, well, that means paraphrasing their thought in a way that simplifies and distorts. But from the perspective of the interlocutor and maybe their friends, the INFJ's thinking is actually comprehensible. Okay? It's just massively oversimplified and distorted and warped. So this sense of being misunderstood, why is it egregious to INFJs? Well, because in a sense, it doesn't comfort them in the sense of their self-understanding. Their self-understanding, the elements of being misunderstood in their self-understanding requires that this being misunderstood is accepted not just as something that they themselves experience, but that other people recognize. In other words, this element of being misunderstood that is almost valued in their self-description has to be a general sense, a socially accepted and validated sense of being misunderstood. Others have to see you as misunderstood as well as yourself. That's what it can be valued by INFJs. Why? And why is that very different from INTJs and INFPs? Well, because INFJs are FE users. FE users, if you're an FE user, a high enough FE user, the phenomenon of being misunderstood is going to be very different in how you deal with it, cope with it, absorb it in your mental framework than if you're an FI user. To the extent that you will integrate the phenomenon of being misunderstood in your self-understanding, it will have to be an overly socially recognized phenomenon. Which is why, if other people say, listen, my dear INFJs, I don't know what you're going on about. You speak a language that is just impervious to me. That's fine for the INFJs because it's collectively recognized. If the interlocutor says, well, you're rambling, you're using all these words, but really what you're saying is A, B, and C, and it's about massive simplification and distortion, the INFJ is the only one who feels misunderstood. The other person thinks the INFJ just had a waffling and not very articulate or eloquent way of expressing something that really is straightforward, and it's A, B, and C. The INFJ knows it's not what they wanted to express, but from the point of view of other people, that is not noticed. So INFJs feel particularly aggrieved by this because, one, the phenomenon of being misunderstood is unpleasant. But second, and that's the worst part, is that this phenomenon of being misunderstood, which is emotionally unpleasant, can't be recovered within INFJ self-descriptions, unlike the other one, because it's not validated by the external tribe. The external tribe doesn't see you as being a misunderstood person. And that's again where INTJs and INFPs will differ massively. Of course, INTJs and INFPs differ from each other too. INFPs have the experience of being misunderstood like INFJs. To some extent, as soon as you have an introverted function that dominates, your reasoning starts from the internal world, the connection to the external world, it's never going to be as straightforward as it is for an extrovert. So you're going to experience feeling misunderstood. INFPs, just like INFJs, have over time integrated this sense of being misunderstood in their self-description. It's something that they almost wear on their sleeves, you might say. Which is also, by the way, why often INFPs and INFJs are seen as type 4s. But anyway, in Enneagram terms. But for INFPs, it's fine if others don't get you or think they get you. Because as long as you know that you're not understood, you're the only arbiter here. Because of FI. So it's easier, in a sense, for INFPs to be misunderstood because they don't need the two conditions to be met. Being misunderstood in a real sense and in a publicly accepted sense. For INFPs, only the first condition needs to be met. The second doesn't matter because they're FI users. For INTJs, because FI is not as high in the functional hierarchy, and NI is high, obviously the sense of vision is going to mean that INTJs are going to experience the feeling that INFJs experience, quite strongly as well. Now, the INTJs, and you'll see that in the Ecstatic Soul if you read this book. Oops. INTJs, I think I can give some rest and show you this nice little thing. INTJs, first of all, they're less alienated from the external world than INFJs because their function of retrieval of that world is TE, which is more effective than FE. So they're less likely to be misunderstood in the first place. They still will be, and it's never going to be pleasant. But because TE is high up, the INTJs will often think, okay, these people are just absolute idiots. They don't understand me, and really it's on them. They're idiots, and that's not my problem. Or an alternative will be, well, okay, these people are either idiots or they mean well, they don't understand me. Let me try to find ways to express myself next time in a way that I can be better understood. So there's a more pragmatic approach that you'll see in high TE users. INTPs will be somewhat like INFPs in this respect of being misunderstood, because JI is the dominant function, TI instead of FI. But again, for an INFP, the subjective validation of they themselves know what they're on about is going to be what is predominant. The slight difference from INFPs, is that there will be a sense of being frustrated that other people are not getting them in INTPs, but it's because of FE, like for INFJs. But because it's usually repressed, it doesn't manifest as much. Finally, a brief note on ENFJs. Well, the thing about ENFJs is they're high FE users, they're dominant FE users. In fact, ENFJs usually don't have too many issues, too many experiences of being misunderstood. Partly this is because the premium they put on being perfectly understood is lower, and usually if they're understood well enough, even if there is a bit of simplification, and even if at the edges there is a bit of distortion, usually that's JE for you, that's FE and TE. If the bulk of the message is conveyed, that's fine for them. That's also where they differ from introverts, and particularly from INFJs in this respect. Okay guys, this has been going on for a while, so again, give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Get the book and review the book if you loved it, the books I should say. Don't forget about my Patreon page, which I'm always eager to have new people join, and I see you on Saturday guys. Bye bye.